Our speaker tonight is a guy named Mark Mittelberg, and you can learn more about him on his website. He has a website that's just his name. It's just his name, markmittelberg.com. Do you have that? I don't have that. And he has a logo. He has an actual logo on his website of like a monogram of his initials, which I found pretty spectacular as well. His title right now is the Executive Director, is that right, of the Lee Strobel Center for Evangelism and Applied Apologetics at Colorado Christian University. Yeah. And you're currently based in Colorado, that's right?
Yep.
Yeah, right. And then he's into mountain biking, and he's into the band Kansas. Give a whoop or something if you know a Kansas song, guys.
Come on.
Maybe. Or if you've been to the state of Kansas, who knows? Whatever. But he's written several books. He's written some of books and training materials with a ministry partner in Lee Strobel. He is a really famous guy, and some of these training courses include Making Your Case for Christ, Becoming a Contagious Christian, and then Mark's also written a few books, one called Confident Faith, an updated book called The Reason Why Faith Makes Sense, as well as the questions Christians hope no one will ask, which will be sort of what this whole thing is about. And so I hope that, let's see here. Yeah, and he has 2 grown children. He lives in Denver, Colorado area, I think. And then, let's welcome him in. So hands of applause, whatever form you want, for our speaker tonight, Mark Mittelberg. Mark Mittelberg.
Hey, thanks so much, David. And I just want to thank everyone for coming out on a Friday night. And I know it's a crazy season. It's been a crazy year. I'm just so glad you took the time to be with us tonight. And I'm really honored to be here. Paul originally invited me. Paul, I don't know, he says we met once at a conference, but Paul Worcester and I are mostly Twitter friends. So I guess social media can really open some doors, I guess. But I want to talk tonight about the truth of the Christian faith and answers to tough questions. And I know many of you are believers. You may have come to Christ more recently. A lot of you, probably like me, grew up in a Christian home, and you kind of just always believed it. You kind of knew it was true or thought it was. But then you get hit with questions, and people come along and they're going, yeah, but what about this? And what about that? And that can really, throw your faith. I was a sophomore and freshman in college when I had a philosophy professor. You've probably all had a professor like this, who challenged the faith of any Christian student in the class and started telling us that the Bible's full of myths and mistakes. It's one of the questions I'll address briefly tonight. He started telling us our views of God were kind of outdated, and he wasn't an atheist, but he was a real skeptic about most of what we believe from the Bible, or at least a lot of it. And it throws you. I mean, it's my buddy Lee Strobel that David mentioned, he calls it spiritual vertigo. It's the feeling of being, kind of off balance a little bit spiritually, where you're going, my parents taught me this is true, and my Sunday school teacher seemed honest enough, and the Bible, yes, that's the book for me, and I stand alone on the Word of God. We all, a lot of us grew up with those kinds of teachings, and it's natural that we would believe and accept those. But then when these questions come along, we've got to take it seriously. And I think part of growing up is reaching a point where we say, we ask ourselves, is this true? How do I know it's true? My parents could have been wrong. My teachers might have been sincere, but they might have been sincerely wrong. How do we know? And how do I answer some of these questions? Well, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And as David mentioned, we're going to kind of base it off of this book, The Questions Christians Hope No One Will Ask. And the story behind that book is that we did a national survey where we called 1,000 Christians around the country, maybe some of you. And we asked them this question. We said, what are the issues you hope the non-Christians in your life won't ask you? What do you hope they won't bring up? Like, for instance, if you're coming up on Thanksgiving, and you're going to have the family together. Maybe you have a skeptical uncle, Uncle Bob, who just doesn't believe what the rest of you believe. And he's always kind of peppering you with hard questions. Well, what do you hope he won't ask you? Well, we asked 1,000 Christians that and got a lot of answers. And then we tabulated those answers. And then the top 10 made this book, and I wrote a chapter on each of them. And what I want to do is I'm going to kind of unpack these, and you should be able to see the slides here. And I'm going to spend a little more time on the first one because the team there asked me to talk about it a little bit. And then I'll spend a little bit of time on the second, and then I'm going to go real quick on the other 8. And then I want to save as much time as I can for us to do Q&A. And you might have questions about what I've said or what I haven't said. You might have questions about these 10 issues, or you may have something outside of the scope of those. It's kind of a free-for-all when we get to Q&A. And as long as it's a real question and something that concerns you or maybe concerns your friends and kind of maybe holds them back spiritually, that's the kind of stuff we'll want to talk about at that point. So with that preliminary, let me go to the first question. We'll go to the next slide here. And this was, I think, the top question that came up in the survey. And it's like, what makes you so sure God exists at all? In fact, the way we say it in the book is, you can't see him, you can't touch him, you can't feel him. How do I know it's real at all? Maybe it's just a figment of your imagination. And the first thing I point out in the book is, we believe in lots of things we can't see or touch or feel. You hear a lot about justice these days, but it's not a tangible thing. I hope we all believe in justice. I hope we all believe in love, but you can't touch it or feel it or see it. You have to kind of experience it. So I think there's an aspect to this that we need to experience. And thankfully, I hope and I trust most of you have experienced God. And maybe as a young child, or maybe somewhere along the way, you experienced, you sensed his presence, you sensed your sin and your need for a savior, and you asked him for his salvation, and you know the difference he's made in your life, and you know how he speaks to you and guides you. That's legit. And I think that's one of the good answers we have. I'm not presenting it as evidence, because a skeptic will say, yeah, everyone has experiences. But for you, that can be very reassuring to say, I know those moments where I'm alone, when I've gone through a really hard time, maybe I'm feeling really down, and God has lifted, he has been strong in my life. He has lifted my spirits. He has encouraged me. There's times I've been out by a lake or looking at the mountains or, the clouds or a sunset, and I've sensed he is there. Well, that's legit. And that's one of the reasons you can be confident that God exists and he's in your life. But I'm going to go through some other little more logic and science-based answers. And let's go to the next slide. We're going to get a little philosophical on this one and look to science for a minute. And by the way, I'm going to go through these quickly. There's a whole chapter just on each of these questions. So I can't slow down too much on this, but the origin of the universe points to existence of a transcendent God. You go, well, how is that? How does that work? Well, there's an argument. It's a 3-part syllogism. If you've had a logic class, you ought to like this. The first part says, whatever begins to exist has a cause. And that's just sort of intuitive knowledge. Anything, you wouldn't walk in a room and say, how did this ball get in here? And if I just said, well, it's always been there, it just always existed, you'd go, come on, who brought it in here? You just know whatever comes into existence has a cause behind it. Well, the universe is a very big ball and it has a cause behind it. And in fact, the second part of the argument says the universe has a beginning. So whatever has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning. In science, they talk about the big explosion, the Big Bang, at which everything came into existence in a fraction of a nanosecond. And it's kind of funny, you know, a lot of times people want to say, well, I believe in science and you guys are a bunch of religious fanatics. And, you know, I trust science over your blind faith. You go, okay, well then how did the universe get here? Well, there was nothing. And then boom, there's a universe. And in a fraction of a nanosecond, it spreads out and it's, you know, vastly huge. You go like, what caused that? Nothing. It's just there. I don't know. It's always been there, or it just created itself. Well, now who sounds like they're just taking things by faith? I do believe it exploded into existence. I just don't believe it happened without a cause. I think there was a big bang, but as philosopher J.P. Moreland says, if there's a big bang, there needs to be a big banger behind it. And I think he's right. And I know some Christians get a little uptight here. And they say, well, I don't believe in any big bang. I believe, you know, the Bible, and it says God created. So, you know, I don't need to listen to science. I believe the Bible. Well, I say, you know, I believe the Bible too, but maybe science got this one right. Maybe when God created the heavens and the earth, you look back at Genesis 1, maybe it made some noise. You know, maybe there was an explosion when, boom, out of nothing, God created everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the argument. Whatever has a beginning has a cause. The universe had a beginning. And I don't think most people would argue with either of those premises, but the conclusion follows. And the conclusion is, therefore, the universe has a cause. And think about it for a minute. That cause has to be outside the universe. So if the physical universe came into existence at the Big Bang, then the cause behind it is a non-physical entity. Well, I would call that spiritual. Further, Stephen Hawking and a lot of other scientists will tell you that at the Big Bang, time itself came into existence. Well, that means the cause of the universe is outside of time. That means it's eternal. It's spiritual and eternal. I would add, it's got to be awfully powerful to, you know, out of nothing, create all the stars, all the planets, you know, the earth, and so on. I mean, in a fraction of a nanosecond, talk about power. It almost sounds like what theologians call omnipotence, you know, all powerful. It also has to be really wise to, you know, the design we see in the universe, the intricacies. I think, you know, that's a lot of knowledge, and theologians call it omniscience. And I think it had to be quite loving to set it up so that it's beautiful and it's hospitable for life. And, you know, you guys live in California. My goodness, you live around beauty all the time. I think that points to a creator who is beautiful and loves beauty and loves us. So that's all just logic drawn out of this one argument without even quoting Bible verses. But now coming back to the Bible, I think that's science pointing to what scripture and theology tells us. Because theologians for centuries have said, in the beginning, God created everything out of nothing. It's if you like Latin, everything ex nihilo, out of nothing, everything came. So basically, what the theologians have said for centuries, the science and scientists have finally caught up with. So that's the first piece of evidence. The origin of the universe points to a divine originator. Second piece of evidence, we can go to the next slide, says that our just so universe points to someone who made it just so. And this is the fine-tuning argument. And I wish I had time to go into detail on this, but basically what this says is that there's a bunch of factors that had to be dialed in to a razor's edge of precision in order for life to exist in this universe. And they're all independent. And I used to, in the book, if you read in the questions book that we've referenced, I said there are about 50 of these. I've been told since then there's more like, they've discovered more and more, there's more like 200. I'll just round out and say, let's just go with 100. That means there's like these 100 big dials in the sky that are all perfectly calibrated to be just what they had to be in order for life to exist. And they're all independent of each other, and they all had to be perfectly dialed in. And I'm telling you, if one's off, we're dead. I mean, if you bump that one of those dials with your elbow, we're toast, or we burn up or something. But they all had to be perfect. And guess what? They're all perfectly calibrated to a razor's edge of precision. So much so that Fred Hoyle, the non-believing scientist who actually labeled the Big Bang, he gave it the name. He looked at these factors and he said, man, it's almost like, again, he doesn't believe in God, but he said, it's almost like someone was monkeying with the physics. And I love that because, wherever there's monkeying going on, there's a monkeyer behind it. Monkeying does not happen on its own. And in this case, it was a very intelligent, very wise, very loving monkeyer who dialed in all the dials so that we could exist today. And I've got some examples of, that really show, I mean, it's like odds, just the odds of one of those dials being where it is so far-fetched that could happen by chance that, as Lee Strobel says, by comparison, it makes the lottery look like a sure bet. Because the odds are much higher of winning the lottery than of those dials being dialed in where they had to be. And we got like 100 of them all dialed in, and we keep discovering new ones. So the evidence from science increasingly points to the need for a designer. And again, if you want some examples, we could talk about those in Q&A. Let me go on to the third piece of evidence. This one is a little different. This one is more internal, and I like this one. It's our sense of morality. And maybe the best way I can describe this one is by raising my right hand and making a confession. Here's my confession. I know what's right generally, and I try to be a good person. I try to do the right things, but I often fall short of that. It's like I have the standard right above my head, and I carry it around with me. And sometimes I do pretty well. I'm not a bank robber, and I'm not in prison. But truth be told, I fall short of that standard. Sometimes I fall way short of it. And, even on my good days, I fall short. And yet I can't get rid of it. I mean, all my life, I've had this thing. And here's my question. Can any of you relate? Maybe a better question. Can any of you not relate to this? We all have a conscience. We all have a sense that, yeah, I do some pretty good things, but even then it's often mixed motives or hidden reasons why I'm being nice to someone, hoping they'll do something for me. And then sometimes I'm just not nice. And sometimes I've done all kinds of things. The Bible says we're sinners. We fall short of a standard. And, I'm going, I don't even live up to my own standard. How much do I fall short of the standard of a holy God? And that's something I know in my heart, and I think you do too. And you know what that points to? That sense of morality points to a moral lawgiver. Because we don't just come up with if this was just a human invention, I would just say, let's have a vote and get rid of it. And then we could recount the votes and all that. But, if it was a man-made thing, then we could just get rid of it. Now, some people say it's more of it's not like individual, it's more when a society decides something. And then the natural response to that is, okay, so if a society says it's okay to be racist, Nazi Germany, then is it okay to hate and kill Jews? No. Okay, then a society can't decide what's right and wrong. Where does this sense of morality come from? I think it comes from a divine moral lawgiver who loves us enough to write his law in our hearts and to show us here's right and wrong, and bad news, you fall short of that standard. Good news is he came to pay for it for us, and we'll get to that later. But I think that sense of morality really points to the existence of a divine moral lawgiver. And if you want to read more about that one, C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity, has a brilliant section about this moral law. And he talks about how, you know, we think we know what a crooked line is, but you don't know what a crooked line is until you have a sense of what a straight line is. And so you don't really know what is immoral till you have a sense of what's moral. And where do you get that? I think there's only one good explanation, and that is a moral source that's beyond us, and that is God. We have one more piece of evidence on this first question, and don't worry, I'm not going to go into this depth on all 10 of the questions, but one more on this. Go to the next slide. And this is like a bonus piece of evidence because in the chapter of the book, I didn't go into this, but I do in other chapters, and I just thought it'd be easier to add it here right now. And that is to say, besides these scientific reasons and philosophical reasons and experiential reasons, we also have a history of God interacting with mankind, of him parting the Red Sea and using the plagues to draw the Israelites out of Egypt and protecting his people and helping them defend themselves against enemies and so forth. And then you come into the New Testament and you have this miraculous birth of a Savior. And he grows up and he has remarkable knowledge and powers and the ability to do miracles. More than that, he fulfills prophecies. And then he dies, says he's going to die for our sins and raise 3 days later. And 3 days later, sure enough, he rises from the dead. And we've got all kinds of evidence for that. So that's more historical kinds of reasons and evidence that point to a divine power behind, what all of that happened. And in the case of Jesus, a divine incarnation, what we celebrate at Christmas, that God became flesh and dwelt among us, then paid for our sins and rose from the dead. And by the way, Lee Strobel, if you haven't read his book, The Case for Christ, he was a skeptic. He was an atheist who studied the evidence for the resurrection, hoping to disprove it. But the more he looked, the more he realized the evidence was against him disproving it, and it supported it supported the claim that Jesus had risen. And he finally reached a point where he said, I realized it would take more faith to maintain my atheism than it would to just become a Christian. And he not only became a Christian, but now he writes books on it and teaches and encourages folks like all of us, and by the way, that's a book you got to read, The Case for Christ. It's just powerful. Also, there's a movie by the same title, The Case for Christ, which won a bunch of awards. It's powerful. It's got some of the evidence in it. It's kind of a love story between him and his wife and how their marriage was challenged by her faith and his resistance, and then how he finally came to faith. But it was because of the evidence for the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus that Lee felt forced to acknowledge there must be a God. So I could go on and on, but that's, we've got good reason, again, from science, philosophy, history, experience, to say there is a God. Now let's go on to question number 2. And again, I'll go through this. I have a few reasons I want to give you on this, but I'm going to go quicker on this, and then I'll click through the other 8, and then we'll open up to Q&A. But this one, excuse me, this one bothers a lot of people. This is a phrase that, a lot of people say, if evolution's true, then why do we need a God? And don't we all know evolution is true? Hasn't it been proven? And a lot of people think it has. So why rely on religion when we've got scientific knowledge that kind of answers all the questions? And here's my response on this, and it might surprise you. First of all, I would say my advice as believers would be not to argue so much about evolution. I think there's reasons to not accept it as they teach it, but I think sometimes we fight in the wrong place, and especially as Christians, sometimes we do these internal, house skirmishes between each other, fighting about how old the earth is and how to interpret certain Bible verses and so forth. And they can be interesting discussions, but I'm telling you, that's not where the real battle is. The battlefront is with the secular world that tells us that it all happened without God, without a designer, without a cause. Life just evolved by chance. It's called scientific naturalism. And that's the enemy. That's what will steal people's soul, because they write off God. They think evolution answers the questions, and I don't need God. And my response is evolution does not answer the questions. Evolution has its own problems, but let me take an approach. Go to the next slide. I call this my even if approach. And what I mean by that is I'll say to someone, look, even if you're right, even if what you were taught in biology classes and what is commonly believed about evolution, even if it's true, it doesn't answer the questions. And let me give you some examples. Let's go to the next slide of what it doesn't answer. First of all, it doesn't answer the matter of matter. And what I mean by that, it doesn't explain where the stuff came from. Because if you think about what Darwin did, the origin of species, it's really about, he kind of starts with life and then talks about how it, muted into all these different kinds of life forms. But he doesn't talk about where the building materials came from. It'd be like saying I could build a house from nothing, but I need you to bring me a bunch of 2x4s and plywood and nails and glue and fiberglass. No, that you're breaking the rule. If you're going to start from, say you don't need God, then you got to start from scratch. The old joke that some preachers tell is that scientists got so smart, they challenged God and they said, look, we can create life just the way you did. And he goes, okay, I'd like to see that. Go ahead. And they go, well, it says in Genesis, you created man out of the dust of the ground. So watch this. And they bend down and pick up a handful of dirt. And God says, stop right there. They go, what? He says, go get your own dirt. You get the point? They're already borrowing from God's resources to try to imitate God. God created the dirt in the first place. So you see what I'm saying? Evolution doesn't really answer where all the building materials even came from. And I think that's best answered by what we already talked about, a designer who put it together and brought everything out of nothing. Let's go to number two. Answer number two on the second question. Another thing that evolution, even if it were true, doesn't answer is how we got the first life, the origin of life. Here's what's so funny. Darwin's book was called Origin of the Species, but when you look, he never really answers how life started. He just kind of says, okay, you get life, and then it starts kind of branching off, and you have the Darwin tree, which has never been proven, and it branches off into all these different species, and they all adapt and change over time. And so that's how it works. But what about the first life? That's the hard part. And you know what? Science has no clue how life began, because one of the most basic axioms is life comes from life. It doesn't just spontaneously, appear. So where did life come from? And I don't know if you saw the movie about evolution a few years back called Expelled with Ben Stein, but they actually interview a bunch of scientists and talk about, well, where did life come from in the first place? And they're like at a loss. And I'm talking about Richard Dawkins and other famous biologists and scientists. It's like, well, it may have been brought here from other planets, it maybe aliens brought. Well, then where did the life of the aliens come from? And where did they get the life they brought here? Well, we don't know. One of the scientists said, well, we think it kind of rode in on the backs of crystals. It's like, what does that even mean? It's like science fiction. The truth is they have no clue how life began. And guess what? We do. In the beginning, God created. And so I think we have an explanation. And I think to make life, you have to have life in the first place. Now, some people say, well, then who made God? And the answer to that is nobody. God is eternal. And some people say, well, I can't believe anything's eternal. Well, guess what? Scientists used to believe the earth was eternal. So people can accept the idea of eternal things. It makes a lot more sense that a transcendent God who tells us he's eternal could be eternal, then the universe is eternal, or that life just popped out of nothing. So origin of first life is not explained by Darwin or neo-evolution. Third, even if answer, is that even if evolution is true, it doesn't explain where we get the information encoded into every cell of every living being in DNA. And this one is amazing. I mean, I'm telling you, I've got a book on my shelf back here, right here. It's called Signature in the Cell by Dr. Stephen Meyer. 600 pages. Now, I'll give you the short answer on this, but I mean, there is vast scientific evidence on this showing that basically what we have in DNA, in other words, in every cell in every one of our bodies, there is information that is encoded in there that is kind of the instruction manual and operation manual for how our bodies work. And it's code. You think like maybe some of you are computer science people, you know, you can't just go buy a new Mac or a new PC and just turn it on without an operating system. There has to be code that gives instructions for how it's going to work. And so you have to have that. Well, we have code encoded into DNA, and it's language. In fact, I've got a quote here I want to give you. This is from Dr. Francis Collins, who was the head of the Human Genome Project that mapped out the entire human genetic code, which was a monumental task. It took decades and millions of dollars and the brightest minds on the planet. And they finally, it was during the time when Bill Clinton was the president, they finally announced, we have finished it, we have completed the genetic code, we have it all mapped out. And it was such a big deal that Clinton did a press conference and brought Francis Collins in, the scientist who was the head of it. And they announced at this, they said, we scientists have now mapped out, they've discovered the language with which God created human life. Quite a statement, isn't it? Well, here's what Dr. Francis Collins says in his book, The Language of God. And he describes what's in every cell of your body. He says, this newly revealed text is 3 billion letters long, billion with a B, and written in a strange and cryptographic 4-letter code. Such is the amazing complexity of the information carried within each cell of the human body that a live reading of that code at a rate of 3 letters per second, you ready for this? It'd be like if I said right now, I'm going to read you the entire code of what's in one of your cells. Ready? I'm going to start right now, and I'm going to finish in the year 2051. Because it takes 31 years, and that's without bathroom breaks, no sleeping, no eating. We're just going to read day and night for 31 years. That's how much information is in every one of your cells. And then he goes on, he says, and if you decide to print it out, I've got my computer printer right here. Let's print it out, and then we'll staple it together. Okay, guess what? If you print it out on normal printer paper, 12-point font, normal stuff, he said, you print it out and bind that in a book, guess how tall it is? The height of the Washington Monument. In other words, the book of information in one of your cells is 555 feet tall. It's like a 40-story building. And that's just the book of information that's in there. Now the question is, where did that information come from? By chance? Like, have you ever heard of a computer code that writes itself? No, you have to have a mind, and in this case, an incredible mind. I mean, what kind of intelligence does it take to write these instructions in a cryptographic 4-part code that is 3 billion letters long, and then somehow wrap it into the strands of DNA like a super compact hard drive, and then put it into every cell of your body. And by the way, that's just the human DNA code. Every living being has its own code. Well, I'm telling you, this points to an incredible encoder. And I think it's a godlike encoder. In fact, I think it is God. And I think, did I have one more reason on this one? Go to the next. Yeah. And then finally, there are problems in the fossil record. The standard narrative of neo-Darwinism has all kinds of problems, even with their own evidence. You know, the lack of transitional species and the gaps, and the fact that in the Cambrian era, there was the Cambrian explosion, and there was just like rapid appearance of all these life forms, and then they just stayed the same in the fossil record. Well, that supports a creation model much more than the standard evolution model. So I think that's worth adding, but a lot of people are so programmed that the standard, you know, doctrine, if I can use that word, on evolution is proven, that I like to go to some of these other things and say, even if it was, you still need God to bring matter. You still need God to create the first life. You still need God to encode the instructions into our DNA. So let me look at my time so I have a sense of how I'm doing. I'm going to click through these other ones, and I know I'm just stirring up problems here by going through these, but let me just at least let you know what else is in the book, and then I'll throw it to Q&A and you can go deeper with these things. But number 3 is, why trust the Bible? This is the one I got challenged with when I was in college. You know, why trust the Bible? Isn't it full of myths and mistakes? And just real briefly, usually the people that says it's full of myths are the people that approach it with skepticism in the first place. The fancy term for it is people have a anti-supernatural presupposition. In other words, they've decided up front there are no miracles, there is no God. Therefore, if it says God created the earth, or he split the Red Sea, or he, you know, brought Jonah in a whale to a different place, you know, and spit him out on the shore, or even Jesus rising from the dead, those are myths because we know those things don't happen. Well, my question is, how do you know they don't happen? The people that were there say they did. So don't call them myths just because you weren't there. The question is, was there evidence for it? And some of those we don't have near the evidence we do, but for the resurrection, we have overwhelming evidence. And for a lot of these other things, like some of the things I've already talked about. So don't call it a myth just because you are skeptical. Look into it, you know, approach it with an open mind. If there is a God, you know, a virgin birth is not a big deal. One philosopher says, you know, virgin births are child's play to a God who can create the universe in a fraction of a nanosecond. So look at it with an open mind. And then what about, isn't the Bible full of mistakes? And the answer is no. Most of what people call contradictions in the Bible are easily answered. And it's usually just differing perspectives from different eyewitnesses. Sometimes one gives more detail than the other, but that doesn't mean they contradict. You know, it'd be like if you look behind me and you say, he has a bookshelf in his office. Well, that's true, but it's not accurate. I mean, yeah, I do have a bookshelf, and that's true, but I have a bunch of bookshelves. So if one person says he has a bookshelf, someone else says he has 4 bookshelves, they're both right, because wherever there's 4, there's 1. So a lot of those things are not contradictions or problems. We just have to realize eyewitnesses always give different perspectives and different degrees of information. Let's go to number 4. Everyone knows Jesus was a good man, but why try to make him into the Son of God too? I actually had a skeptic once say to me, he goes, you know, if Jesus knew you guys were worshiping him today, he'd roll over in his grave. And I smiled and I said, newsflash, I think you missed some information. He's not in his grave anymore. Besides that, Jesus, you know, when people say, you know, later people tried to turn him into some kind of a God figure. Well, guess what? When Jesus was born, you know, we're going to sing about it at Christmas. The angels announced it to the shepherds. There were miracles happening. Magi were drawn by, you know, following a star. They worshiped him. You shouldn't worship a mere human being. Well, he wasn't a mere human being. He was God incarnate. Jesus received worship from his disciples. Even after his resurrection. Remember when Thomas was doubting, and then he appeared in front of Thomas, and Thomas realizes this is Jesus and I can see the scars. Thomas then, you know, falls before him and says, and you can read this in John 20:28, he says, "My Lord and my God." Because, he realized who he was. And Jesus didn't say, no, 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 don't call me God because, I'm just a man. No, he didn't. He received that. He received worship because Jesus knew who he was. He was God incarnate. Number 5. Boy, this one's hard to do in 90 seconds. This is probably the hardest question. How could a good God allow so much pain, evil pain and suffering, or does he simply not care? Well, he does care. And again, this is a question we might want to hit more in Q&A. And I want to say, if you're going through pain, I know a lot of people are depressed in the middle of this COVID nonsense. And if you make the mistake of turning the news on, you'll get more depressed. We're in a tough time. And if you're hurting, you probably don't need philosophical or, theological answers right now. You probably need to reach out to some of the people in your Christian club or your group or whatever, and you need encouragement, and you need prayer, and you need maybe just time to heal, and maybe some help, maybe some counseling. So, a lot of these are not things we just answer with me kind of blurting out 4 points or something. However, I do have some points I can make. And let me just make a more philosophical one, and that is, there is pain and evil in the world, whether you believe in God or not. And a lot of people say, oh, I can't believe in a good God because of all the suffering, so I'm just going to be an atheist. Well, what have you done now? All you've done is walked away from the God that could help you through it. Because, Jesus was realistic about this. He says in John, I think it's 16:33, he says, in this world, you're going to have trouble. This is a messed up world. It's a fallen world. We're in a world that disobeyed God, and we're under a curse right now, the whole cosmos. And so Jesus said, in this world, it's not if, it's when. You're going to have trouble or tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. He's saying, come to me and I'll help you through it. Well, when you say, I'm not going to believe in that kind of a God, then all you're doing is facing it alone. And by the way, it really takes away any hope of hope, because as soon as you go the atheist route, you're saying, well, in essence, if you go to any of the famous atheists like Richard Dawkins, none of it matters. Your life, according to Richard Dawkins, your life has no purpose. It has no meaning. It's an accident. You're just here for a little time, when you burn out and it's over, and none of it has any meaning. And so he says, the universe is marked by blind, pitiless indifference. And ultimately, there is no real evil in a world where there is no God. It's just preferences. Some people like to, bless their neighbors. Other people like to eat their neighbors. Who am I to judge them? Well, the answer is, I'm nobody to judge them. But God has spoken. And I'm pretty sure there's a commandment somewhere in the Bible not to eat your neighbors, or to lie to them, or cheat with them, or cheat them, or steal their stuff, or kill them, or anything like that. So, atheism is not an answer. It's an escape, and it's not a good escape. All it does is maybe expresses your anger about what you're going through. But I think the best answer is to turn back to the one who suffered for us, and the one who can sympathize. It says in Hebrews 4, we can approach him and find help and mercy because he's suffered like we did. I mean, none of us have been crucified. None of us has suffered like Jesus did. He suffered for us and rose again. That's the one I want to go to deal with my pain and suffering. Number 6, why do Christians make such a big deal about abortion? Why can't I make my own choices for my own body? You always hear that, leave my body alone. And my response to that is, I kind of agree with you. I think we should leave your body alone. The problem is, the baby inside of you is not your body. That baby inside of a young woman, even at the earliest stages, has its own distinct DNA. Has it, at very early stages, it gets its own brain waves, its own blood type, its own fingerprints. We can even see now in the womb that there's emotion and reactions, and the fetuses feel pain at a very early age. So we're talking about a human being here. The Bible talks about us being fearfully and wonderfully made, even in the womb. So if we can't get excited about and get fired up about defending human life, why is it such a big deal to save stray animals, or save the whales, or save the darter snails, or all these things? I'm not saying any of those are bad causes, but I'm saying humans are worth far more. And that's why we get fired up about that. Let's go on to number 7. All right, so why do Christians seem to condemn homosexuality when it's clear that God made gays and loves all people the same? This is kind of the born this way argument. This is Lady Gaga's song here. So people say, if God made me this way, then it must be right. It must be, whatever propensities I'm born with must be from God, right? Well, what do you say to someone who's a pedophile and they just naturally are attracted to, young kids or infants? Well, they're born that way, so it must be okay, right? No. I hope we would all agree that is evil, that is wrong. But a lot of people are kind of born that way, in the sense that as early as they can remember, they have these attractions. We say, well, then you got to stop those. You got to discipline yourself, or get help, or do something, but you don't touch the kids. And I agree with that, but that kind of kills the argument. What about the fact some people are born racist? They just, as early as they can remember, they don't like people with a different skin color. Does that make it okay? No. What about people that are born just kind of naturally not liking homosexuals? They're just sort of born that way. They're born homophobes. Well, that makes it okay, right? No. So you get my point. The fact that you're born, we live, as I said a minute ago, we live in a fallen world where things are messed up. So the fact that you're born with certain propensities, my dad was the son of an alcoholic. He was born predisposed toward alcoholism and started going down that path until he woke up, and thankfully at age 17 or 19 gave his life to Christ. And he said part of the ways he succeeded in life is he would always ask himself, what would my dad do? And then he did the opposite, because he knew his dad was just going the wrong way. So my dad went the opposite way of what he was kind of naturally inclined to do. So that's what Christianity talks about, that we got to ask God what's right and wrong, and let him guide us about how we approach these things. And the Bible is very clear that everyone matters to God, including same-sex attracted people, including you if you have those attractions. But that doesn't mean it's okay to live that lifestyle. And the Bible's very clear. Jesus was very clear in Matthew 19. He said, here's the design, here's the plan. And it goes all the way back to Genesis. A man and a woman will leave their parents and come together and become one flesh. That's the biblical sexual ethic. And he lovingly presented that. God is love. Jesus was very kind about it, but he was very unyielding about what is right and wrong. And we need to imitate Jesus. We need to have his divine mix of love and truth, loving all people, but not being afraid to talk about the fact that God has spoken about these areas and tells us what's right and wrong. There may be questions on that in the Q&A, but let's go on to number 8. This one says, why are so many Christians hypocrites, saying one thing but living another? And part of me just wants to agree with it and go, yeah, it's a good question, because there are a lot of hypocrites in the church. But guess what? There's a lot of hypocrites in other religions, and there's a lot of atheists who claim to be good, upstanding, moral people, and then they do all kinds of other things. So there's hypocrisy everywhere. And that's not to justify it, but that's saying it's a universal human problem, because guess what? We are all sinners. We all do fall short of the standard. So that's part of the answer. But the other is, this is a challenge. If you're claiming to be a Christian, but not following what God says about sexuality or purity or honesty or kindness or justice or any of those things, and you're just living a lifestyle that denies what you say you are, then you need a wake-up call. And actually, I was one of those. When I was 19, I had grown up in the church, and I claimed to be a Christian because I was a church kid, but I was not living it. And it took someone, actually a friend from high school, looked me in the eye and called me a hypocrite. And it ticked me off, but it made me think. And about a week later, I gave my life to Christ. So one more thing I'll say on this. You know who hated hypocrisy more than anyone? Jesus. Jesus was hard on hypocrisy. So when someone tells me I hate Christian hypocrites, I'm going, you know who's on your side on that one? Jesus. And so maybe if you agree with Jesus on this one, maybe you'll like a lot of other things Jesus says. Maybe you need to look into Jesus. In fact, I'll loan you a Bible if you need one. But I think you're going to like what Jesus says and what he does, because he was the only person that had no hypocrisy in him. And he didn't like it either, just like you don't. Let's go to number 9. Why are Christians so judgmental toward everyone who doesn't agree with them? I'll give this in 2 parts as well. First of all, there are judgmental Christians. And again, there are judgmental Buddhists and judgmental Muslims and judgmental atheists. And that's where you just condemn people and I'm better than you and that kind of attitude. And it stinks. And it stinks the worst when it's a Christian. But, a lot of people say, Jesus said you should never judge. No, he didn't actually say that. Jesus warned about having a judgmental attitude that condemns other people, makes you think you're better than other people. But he also said to judge with right judgment. So there's a good kind of discerning judgment where you say, this is true, this is not true, this is good, this is not good. We're called to have that kind of discernment or judgment, but not to have condemning attitudes toward other people. One other thing I want to say on this is, it's not, sometimes people think we're judgmental because we think we're right as Christians. You guys always think you're right, and that's judgmental because you think you're right and everyone else is wrong. And my response to that is, so do you. Everybody thinks they're right. I mean, and if someone says, well, no, I don't, I go, okay, what part of what you believe is wrong? And I've never had anyone answer that, because if they believe it, they think it's right. So the truth is, everyone thinks they're right. And the question isn't, is that good or bad? The question is, how do you know if you're right? And as Christians, we need good reasons. That's why we're having this session tonight. Let's go on to the last one, number 10. Why should I think that heaven really exists? And why should I believe that God sends people to hell? It's kind of a loaded question. First of all, there's good reason to believe heaven exists. The biggest reason I'd give you is Jesus, the Son of God, who came and had all the credentials of being the Son of God. He fulfilled prophecy, did miracles, rose from the dead. He told us about heaven. And I think he's a reliable source of information for a place that he not only has been, he created it along with the Father and the Holy Spirit. So there's good reason. And I think near-death experiences and other things point to the reality of that. What about hell, though? Why does God send people to hell? And the answer to that is he doesn't. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying no one ends up in hell. I'm saying God doesn't send them there. And I can show you the verses, 2 Peter 3. It says, God is not willing that anyone perish, but he is patient with you, hoping that you'll come to repentance and turn. And in fact, it's in the context of saying, why hasn't Christ come back to judge the earth yet? Because he's waiting for you, or he's waiting for your brothers, or he's waiting for your friends. He's waiting for people that need to come to know him. God is loving and he's patient, but ultimately the trumpet's going to blow and it's going to be, time out. It's going to be over. And ultimately, I like the way C.S. Lewis says it. He says, we shake our fists at God. We say, leave me alone, leave me alone. Yeah, maybe when I'm 90 on my deathbed, I'll come to you, but I want to have fun in the meantime, because of course I know how to run my life better than you do. And so we live our life, we push him away, push him away, push him away, and then we die. And what C.S. Lewis says is ultimately God says, have it your way. You never wanted me. Now you can live without me in eternity. And it's a sobering reality, but it's the person who chooses to reject the love of God, because salvation is available to anyone who wants it. One of the last verses in Revelation says, whosoever will come unto me. It's an open invitation. And I just would add, as I kind of close out this part of the deal, it's an open invitation to you. Heaven and hell are real. Jesus talked about hell a lot and heaven, but he said, don't just fear someone who can kill your body. Fear the one who can condemn your soul to hell because you've rejected his salvation. And I just want to say, this is sobering. This is real. And so, I think if you haven't done it yet, if you've been sitting on the fence, tonight's a good night to say yes to Christ, to say, what am I hanging on to? What is so important, or I think is so good in my life, that it's worth risking my eternity, not to mention the adventure of following and serving him in this life. What's worth it to risk all? And my answer is nothing. Jesus said, what does it profit a person to gain the whole world? You can be Steve Jobs and be a billionaire but ultimately your life's going to end like it did for Steve. It's not worth risking your eternity. I hope Steve found Christ along the way. I don't know if he did, but you're listening to me right now. So you still have opportunity to say yes to Christ, to say, yes, I'm a sinner who needs a savior. I need his forgiveness. So I hope you'll do that, and you can do it tonight or soon. And for the rest of us that know him, I hope we'll speak truth to our friends that need to know him as well. So, David, I don't know how did I do on the time here?
We're good, man. I mean,
all right.
I think so.
Little over. Oh, that's just a picture. The book that I've been talking about is the one on the left. It's football season, so let me just say, that one on the left, that's sort of my defense, where I answer those 10 questions. The one on the right is my offense, and confident faith. And the red arrows on the page represent reasons to believe what we believe. And I've hit a few of them as we've gone through tonight, but reasons from science and history and philosophy and archaeology and miracles of Jesus and the resurrection and so on. And I present 20 arguments for the truth of the Christian faith and reasons I think we can have a confident faith. Before we go to Q&A, let's just go to one more slide. Let me just mention this. You mentioned it when you kind of read my bio at the beginning. But let me just mention Lee Strobel, who wrote The Case for Christ, The Case for Faith, The Case for a Creator, The Case for California, all those good books. I don't know if he's written that one yet. But anyway, great books, great teacher. A lot of people have said he's kind of the C.S. Lewis of today. I don't know if that's true or not, but he really knows how to articulate the truth of the Christian faith. And I've also written a bunch of books. Well, Lee and I are ministry partners, and we partnered with Colorado Christian University to do what we call the Strobel Center. And you see the URL, strobelcenter.com. And what this is online accredited training at both the undergraduate and graduate level. So you can get a degree, you can get a master's degree in apologetics, which is the defense of the faith, or in global apologetics, or in cultural engagement, or in innovative evangelism. And you can do that through the center, and you can get information there. And let me just add, I know most of you are already at a college somewhere, and that's great, but you could do these online and learn some things, and then maybe use the credits which are accredited as elective credits for wherever you do go to school, and supplement your training with some of our online courses. So if you go to that page, there's a bunch of information, and there's some videos of Lee and I kind of explaining all of that.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for mentioning those resources, Mark.
Sure.
And yeah, if anything, we're gonna do some Q&A now. And so hopefully Mark's gonna answer some questions. The big questions that you guys have put in the chat there. But of course, if there's anything unanswered, you know, you can maybe reach out to somebody who is leading the ministry that you're a part of, but then also he's got these great resources they just mentioned. You got to read the book. You got to go to the different things. So we got some questions. So let me start that off. So let's see. So we tried to compile these. Some of these questions are fairly similar to each other.
Sure.
And so one that probably got the most kind of similar responses would be this problem of, like, what makes Christianity different from other world religions? We see all these religions around, and Christianity kind of seems like just one of them. There's these different Abrahamic religions. It kind of just looks like other religions or religious texts. So how do we know that's the real one?
Yeah, I love that question. And I know that there's often an assumption, you know, like, aren't all the religions the same? I mean, they basically teach the same thing. You know, you've got a God, you've got some rules. We have different names for God, but it's all kind of the same concept. And I like what John Lennox, he's an Oxford professor and math professor. Guy has 3 PhDs. He said the only people that say that all the religions are the same are atheists who don't believe in any of them. And I think there's some truth to that. What makes Christianity unique? Might sound a little politically incorrect, but I think what makes it unique is that it's true. So let me back that up a little. Some of them they don't even present evidence, largely, and that's a broad statement, but there are a lot of religions that kind of just tell their story. I went with a group in Chicago back when I was part of a church there. We went on a tour. We went to a bunch of different religious sites, and we went to a Hindu temple where the guide, very nice guy who was giving us the tour of the temple, he said, he kind of was proud of his religion. He said, you know, I just got to tell you, part of why I love being a Hindu is it's the oldest religion in the world. And then he went on and he said, in fact, it's so old, we don't know where it came from. I thought, yikes, you know, sign me up. Really? I mean, I don't really want to commit my life to something that you don't even know, like, where it came. I mean, like, if I'm in a restaurant and the waitress comes by with a plate and has something on it and says, do you want to eat this? And I'm going, I don't know, what is it? She goes, I don't know. I'm not sure where it came from. It's like, I don't think I'll eat that. And again, I know there's going to be some articulate people that say, yeah, but Hindus do have some arguments and so on. But a lot of what they have is just kind of stories about, like, Lord Krishna, who some people think is just a total myth. Other people say he lived in such and such a century. A lot of people that are not sure what century he lived in. So that's not a historical basis. That's not something with evidence you can grab onto. Let me give a different example, and that's Islam. Islam does make very specific historic claims. And again, I'm just speaking truth in a succinct way here. Some of those claims are just wrong. For instance, it makes the claim that Jesus did not die on the cross. There's a verse in the Quran that says they thought they crucified him, but they crucified him not. And then it implies it was someone else. And a lot of Muslims believe, based on that verse in the Quran, that it was Judas who died on the cross because God wanted to fool everyone and, you know, not let his prophet die in such a shameful way. In fact, that's what the Imam told us that same day. After we went to the Hindu temple, we went to a mosque. And he told us that. And I raised the question. I said, what historical basis do you have for saying that? He said, well, you know, the Quran. I said, well, the Quran was written 600 years after the time of Christ by a guy who had no historical data, and it was 600 miles away from where these events happened. So you're telling me, based on a guy 600 years later who talked to an angel in a cave, that Jesus didn't die on the cross or rise from the dead. He also said Jesus never claimed to be the Son of God. And I have, you know, as Christians, we have eyewitnesses who walked and talked with Jesus for 3 years who said he repeatedly claimed to be the Son of God. They saw him, some of them saw him on the cross, that it was Jesus who died. His mom was there. She would have known if it was Judas or someone else. It was Jesus. And then 3 days later, they saw the risen Christ, and they met with him, and they touched him, and they ate with him. So the evidence from the eyewitnesses tells us all of that is true. It's just not a valid historical claim to then 600 years later tell a different story. So I won't go into more examples just for time, but the evidence points to the truth of Christianity. And the more, and I've studied this for decades, the more I study, the more confident I become. And I think the same will be true for you. But you got to read the books. You got to study these things. And I think you'll find the same thing to be true.
Great. Thanks, Mark. So let's see. Where do I go next? I have so much power here. So one thing that came up a few times has to do with your question number 3 in the book, which had to do with what just is, can the Bible be trusted, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, specifically somebody talks about, you know, like, how do we know that what we hold in our hands today, what's been translated, is truly what was in the original language?
Yeah. Good. Another great question. And there's a lot of accusations that are based on misinformation. People will say, you know, it's been retranslated so many times that, you know, how do you know that it didn't get all messed up along the way? And sometimes people use the example of the children's game called Telephone, where, you know, you start with a message, you have a circle of kids in a room, all socially distanced with face masks on today. That's a joke. But you have them in a circle and you whisper like a, you know, you're my best friend. And then they whisper it to the person, you know, it goes all the way around. By the time it gets back, you're no longer a friend, you're a fiend. And, you know, the message gets corrupted. And a lot of people that think that's how we got the Bible, and it's just not. The reality is that the original writings were in mostly Greek and Hebrew, and we have copies of those. We have manuscript copies, and especially in the New Testament, the Greek manuscripts, we have copies or fragments of copies that dwarf any other ancient writing in the sense that most ancient writing, like take Plato, for example. Plato, we only have about 6 or 7 copies, maybe 8. And they're like 800 to 1,000 years after Plato wrote what he wrote. So you got like a millennia later, and you only got 6 or 7 copies. But people who study say, but they're good copies. We think we got Plato. Okay, good. You got Plato. Well, what do we have in the New Testament? Well, we have the first fragment, like 25 or 30 years after John wrote John. We have a fragment of John found all the way over in Egypt already. And that's the first of about 5,800 manuscripts or fragments of manuscripts just in Greek alone of the New Testament. If you go to other languages, we have like another 20, 25,000. On average, Daniel Wallace, who's an expert in this, he says, on average, we have about 1,000 times as much manuscript evidence for the New Testament as any other ancient writing. In fact, he calls it an embarrassment of riches. And so you look at that, you go, we have all this documentation, and then we have every good translator goes back to those original documents. So going back to the game of telephone, it'd be like each kid, and by the way, it wouldn't be kids, it would be scholars or adults, very serious people, and they each get to go back to the original and look at it and then make their translation. So, you know, that would be much more accurate. And that's what we have with, you know, for instance, like when Jerome wrote the Vulgate, which was the early Latin translation. Well, then later Martin Luther wrote, you know, much later, Martin Luther did the German translation. He may have looked at the Vulgate, but he also went back to the Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. When King James did the 1611 King James Bible, he didn't really base it on Martin Luther or Jerome's Vulgate. He based it on, you know, they, not he, there was a whole committee, based it on the original writings. So we have a reliable process by very careful, conscientious people. And you look at the translations we have today, and you know, there's a lot of good ones, but like this is an NIV, I've got an NLT. These are usually done by a committee, like the New International Version, of like 100 world-class brainiacs who have given their life to studying the original languages and the biblical documents. And then they argue together until they really hash out what is the most accurate reading. So we have great reason for confidence. It doesn't mean what we hold is perfect. And there are places where they'll have footnotes and say, we're not sure. Some of the manuscripts of that we draw from had different variations, but they just tell you where those are, and none of those affect any serious meaning or doctrine.
Yeah, awesome.
So, I mean, just to conclude, we have great reason to be confident.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mark. That one, good stuff. So, moving on to some more questions. One that stood out that's important to address, I think, is that, so why does God allow some people to go without hearing the gospel in their lives? We know maybe of like different unreached people groups in the world who might never get a chance to like hear that. And, you know, what happens to those people and why does God allow that, basically? Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, I don't think it's ever God's will for someone not to hear. And that's why, Jesus, one of his most important things he ever said was right before he left. After his crucifixion, resurrection, he spent like 40 days with the disciples, making appearances, teaching them. And then when he was about to ascend back to heaven, you can read this in the end of Matthew chapter 28. He gets the disciples together and he says, oh, by the way, before I go, here's your mission. And, people call it the Great Commission. He said, I want you to go into all the world and make disciples. In other words, I want you to go and teach them all that I've taught you. And I want you to baptize them. And I want, and duplicate the faith. And that, that's how he launched the Christian movement. But the goal was, he said, go into every nation and make disciples. And the mission is to reach everybody all around the world. And here's what's funny. I mean, a lot of times people say this thing, so what about all the lost people in Africa or wherever? That the Christianity there's more Christians now in what we used to call the third world than there is in the Western world. In fact, we're getting so bad here that they're starting to send missionaries from other parts of the world to the United States and to North America to try to help us. So this myth that, it's like limited to one people group or one race or one nation is just a myth. In fact, missiologists believe that within not too many years, probably 10 or 12, 15 years, China will be the largest Christian nation in the world. Now, I'm not saying the highest percentage of Christians there, but the highest number compared to any other nation. So that's part of the answer. The other thing I just want to say is, I believe that Jesus was telling us the truth in Matthew 7, verses 7 and 8, where he said, if you seek, you'll find. If you knock, the door will be open. And, so do that, seek and look and find, and you'll find it. And I think that promise is true anywhere in the world. I'll give you one example. I met a man named Mahindra in Chicago who was raised in India in a Hindu family. And he always asked too many questions, drove his parents crazy, and just didn't accept the answers he was hearing in Hinduism. So they were a wealthy family, so they hired several gurus to kind of come and tutor him in the true faith of Hinduism. But that didn't work because he kept asking them too many questions. Well, basically, he was doing what Jesus said. He was seeking truth. He was knocking at the door. He was asking for answers. And eventually, he got a hold of some Christian scriptures. He later met a missionary. He ended up coming to faith in Christ, and then he gave his life to reaching other Hindus in India. And there's stories like that all around the world. When someone sincerely seeks God, he can get them the information they need. And by the way, they hope by about the year, in fact, Paul is really the expert on this, Paul Worcester, but because I just endorsed the book he wrote. In there, I think, he can jump in if he's here. I think he said by about 2050 or so, they expect that every unreached people group will be reached. That may be a little longer than that, but we're making great progress. And that's why I've given my life to teaching on these things. People matter to God, and they need the truth. They need the gospel.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Yep.
For your answer there. Yeah, got the shout out for Mark, for Paul there. Let's see. I think I'll do one more. I'll do one more here. And so you kind of touched a little bit on the problem of like suffering, and one.
So we're going to end on an easy one here, huh?
Oh, yeah, right. There's no easy ones.
I just got to tell you, Lee Strobel and I joke about this when we do live Q&As in a room. We always say, let's just not take one more question, because it's always the hardest one. And we've had, where it's like, okay, we got time. Oh, we got 2 minutes, one more. And then like a woman stands up in tears and like, why did I lose my baby? Or why did my husband die? It's like, oh my God, we should have stopped 2 minutes ago. But they're important questions, and
yeah, for sure. yeah. All right. Well, I think you can handle it. All right.
Okay, let's go.
So, one like succinct way of putting this from somebody said, what do you say to somebody who says, if God is all powerful, then he cannot be all good, and if God is all good, then he cannot be all powerful? These seem to contradict each other.
Yeah, because if he was all powerful, he would have the ability to stop evil. And if he was all good, he would stop evil. I think that kind of a simple formula, first of all, it goes way back to, who was it, Hume? It's an argument that's been used for centuries. I think it tries to put God in the box. God says, my ways are higher than your ways. God's thoughts are often hidden. We don't always know why he allows things, but to say, put him in this box, if he's good, he would stop it. And if he's all powerful, he'd be able to. And of course, if he's all knowing, he'd know about the evil and do something. Well, what if he's allowing the evil for other purposes? And I already gave examples of this. 2 Peter 3 says exactly that. It says that he is not coming, because people say, if God was a good God, he would eliminate evil from the world. And the standard response to that is, okay, be careful what you ask for. If God eliminated evil tonight at midnight, how many of us would be around tomorrow morning to watch Good Morning America? I mean, there's evil in all of our lives. So don't be begging for God's judgment. And again, what Peter said in 2 Peter 3 is the reason he hasn't come and brought judgment and all that, which he will do, but the reason he hasn't is because he doesn't want people to perish. He doesn't want you to perish. He's being patient and loving and kind. So God has his reasons. But I also just want to again remind you, Jesus said, you'll have trouble in this world, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And implicit in that statement is, come unto me. What Jesus said in another place, he said, come unto me, you who are weary, you're tired. I mean, is anyone not tired right now? I mean, all this COVID stuff and face masks, and especially in California, you like have to have it like up, and then when you take a bite, you have to then put it back up. Is that right? I mean, it gets, I read that somewhere. So David, you better be doing that. I hear that Gavin Newsom might make it so you have to push it through the mask now, but I joke. But anyway, I'm just saying, it's a tiring year. And a lot of people are, I'm on Twitter. I see a lot of people just say, I'm so weary. And I read that, I'm going, I'm kind of tired too. And a lot of people are feeling anxiety and depression. And we're just feeling a lot of that stuff. And isn't it refreshing to look to a verse where Jesus said, you who are weary, are you tired? Come to me and I will give you rest. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. It's like, I'm gentle in spirit. I am loving. Come unto me. I mean, I'm not going to take all your problems away. I mean, eventually I will in heaven, but I will at least walk with you through the pain, walk with you through the suffering, through the problem. And there's also a promise for those of us that do follow him in Romans 8:28, one of the most abused verses in the Bible. but it's got a truth to it that's really encouraging, where it says he causes all things to work together for good for those of us who love him and are called according to his purpose. Now, that doesn't say all things are good, and it doesn't say he causes all things to work for good for everybody. It's only a promise to those of us who come under his umbrella of protection by receiving his forgiveness and his salvation and following him. And to those of us that are willing to do that and be adopted into his family and become children of God, he's saying, I will bring good out of any evil, any suffering you go through. And again, that doesn't mean we won't go through suffering. It just means he can bring good out of it that we may not anticipate, we may not understand. Often we may not ever know about it until late in our life or even in eternity. But it's a great promise to know, if I find out I have COVID tomorrow, I can look at that verse and say, God's going to do something good out of this. And I don't understand what it is, but it's a great promise to have.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks, Mark, for answering these questions. We kind of gotta kind of wrap things up here. And of course, I'm sorry, guys. We can't get to all the questions. Some of them are less relevant to what we're talking about in this setting, but then also, I tried to give them some hard ones, you guys. And so, but if you got some more burning questions, read some of his books. I think they'll cover some of that stuff, as well as you can also, go into some of the other resources he mentioned, and kind of said earlier, but like you can talk to somebody who is a Christian, who is a little bit farther, in front of you, and they might not even have the answer to these questions, but they can maybe help you process some of these things, especially if it's very personal.
And there's a lot of ministries on social media that do a lot of Q&A and Sean McDowell and William Lane Craig. I mean, I'm on Twitter if people want to ask on Twitter about other resources, or, if it's a specialty area, they want to know more about world religions or Islam or Mormonism or history or whatever. I mean, I can point to resources. And the book that we've been talking about has a section of recommended resources in there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, what would be your final words, your closing remarks for us tonight, Mark?
I know we're short on time, so let me just say this quickly. If you're kind of, as I said earlier, kind of on the fence, you're saying, he hasn't proved it to me. I'll just tell you right now, it doesn't work that way. There is no absolute proof for any worldview. But if you're saying, I can't believe in it till I have all the evidence or till I have what feels like proof or whatever, so I'm just going to stay neutral. Here's my message to you. You're not neutral. There is no neutral ground. Jesus said, either you're for me or you're against me. And as long as you resist him, as long as you say no to him, you're making yourself an enemy of God. And I mean, that's hard truth, but that's what Jesus taught. The most loving being ever said those very words. And so you're not neutral. In fact, you have faith in something right now. And you go, no, I don't. I'm an atheist. Well, guess what? You have faith that there is no God. You don't have proof that, in fact, the evidence is against you. It's what I've tried to show tonight. But you have faith that there is no God, and you're kind of taking a blind leap of faith that there is no higher standard that you're going to be held accountable to, and there is no judgment. You don't have proof of any of that. You're living by faith in your atheism. Or if you're a Muslim or you're a Hindu or any other religion, you're putting your trust in those things. My question is, how good is the evidence? And I tell you, I have more years studying this than most of you have on the planet, and the evidence doesn't hold up for those other worldviews. The evidence points to the truth of Christianity. It's not absolute proof, but to use legal terms, courtroom terms, the preponderance of the evidence overwhelmingly points to the truth of Christianity. That's why, again, on the book cover, I have these red arrows. It all points to the middle. It points to the truth of the Christian faith. And so I hope you're seeing that tonight. And I would just urge you, consider what you've heard, and more than that, internalize it and pray, even if you're not sure there's a God out there. Talk to the God who might be there and say, God, if you're real, show me. And if this stuff makes sense, confirm it. I'm willing to study it. I'm willing to look into it. Jesus said, seek and you'll find. In the Old Testament, in Jeremiah, it says, "Seek, you'll find me when you seek me with all your heart." So I just want to challenge you, make this a front burner issue. Get serious about it. And I believe the promise of Jesus. If you do that, and if you seek, you will find not only him, but forgiveness, salvation, new life, a new mission for your life, hope, joy, peace. All the stuff we're looking for comes with knowing Christ, and I hope you'll find that soon.
That's true. That's true. Thank you so much, Mark. Give them a round of real or virtual applause.
I see it there in the corner. Thank you, everyone. It's been great spending this time with you, and really appreciate you hanging there. I know it's a lot of information, but I hope you feel encouraged. And as believers, I hope you have stuff to share with your friends now as well.
Great. Thanks so much. Yeah, excellent.